Welcome to OState Daily. Casey Porter here. So glad that you decided to tune in. Fans, today we have a very, very, very special guest. Very special to all of the Big 12. And if you've followed KState forever, you know of the Hall of Famer, Wyatt Thompson, 7-time Kansas Broadcaster of the Year in the Hall of Fame. Hey, I can't tell you how big of an honor this is. I picked up the phone and I called a number. I was kind of giggling. I was like, yeah, right, I'm going to get a message. And then there Wyatt answered. I was like, hey, I'll take a shot at the dark. And he's like, heck yeah, let's jump on. And here we are, right?
Why wouldn't I want to talk K-State, Oklahoma State, right? Good to be on with you, buddy. And I mean that sincerely. I enjoy the Oklahoma State fan base and what you guys are all about. I think we're very similar in yes. What we do football-wise. And this is going to be a pretty big football game on Saturday in my mind.
It absolutely is. And a couple of things that pop out to me, K-State just is real stingy in stopping the run. I mean, opponents just do not run the ball on them. Oklahoma State has not been able to whatsoever get the running game going this year. But then maybe K-State's secondary has given up a little bit more passing than maybe they'd like. And that's what OSU a lot of times can do well. So I think that's very intriguing.
Yeah, I do too. I think you said that well, because generally speaking, K-State has been very good at, I won't say stopping, but neutralizing or trying to neutralize the run game. And you can do that a little bit against Oklahoma State and they can still hurt you. They do so many things offensively, and because of their veteran group, and that they're about as veteran as anybody in America, they can still create some headaches. I'm visiting with Coach Klieman this week. He said, Brennan Presley's been there so long, he gives me a headache every time I see him on film. It's just kind of what it is.
You mentioned Coach Klieman, and I show my age every time I think about him, because every time I go on a podcast or whatever, yeah, like 2 or 3 years ago, he came into Manhattan and beat K-State with no, that was 11 years ago.
Yeah.
It seems like it was 3 or 4 years ago, but that was an audition. It turned to come to find out. Of course, he won several national championships at the FCS Division I AA level there at North Dakota State. But came in 2013 with his Bison team, beat Kansas State, a Kansas State team, I believe that was in the top 10 at the time, and became the coach after that whenever Bill Snyder stepped down. So talk about him.
Well, he's been a really good fit, to be honest. And I don't know if anybody really honestly wanted to follow Bill Snyder, because it was going to be difficult no matter how good you were. And I've told Chris this, I've told Gene Taylor, our athletic director, this. The thing that I appreciated about all of that situation is I think Gene Taylor, our AD, knew that he was going to be criticized for the hire. And he kind of has put it like this over the years. You mean you're hiring an FCS guy? Yeah. And that FCS guy turned out to be pretty good. And what I admire about Coach Klieman is he was pretty much comfortable in his own skin, and didn't try to be Bill Snyder. He was good enough to be Chris Klieman, right? And I think he's been a terrific coach, very consistent. We struggled during COVID, but there were a lot of people that did. But since then, I think we've just gotten better and better. We've recruited better. He's done a whale of a job here in my mind.
He absolutely has. It seems like he connected with the K-State fan base right away, too. And, hey, I like how you put it, comfortable in his own skin, which can be very difficult when you replace a legend. Replacing a legend just almost never works in sports. And one way that I think that really comes through very heavily, I watched his press conference this week. After K-State loses, especially when they don't play well like they didn't last week, that seems like when Coach Klieman is at his calmest and just kind of is his best version of himself.
He's a very matter-of-fact guy, win or lose, if I'm being honest. And I think that's another thing that I appreciate him. You know, for years and years being here at K-State, we always talked about how consistent Bill Snyder was in everything he did on the field, in the locker room, around the football program, around the university, home, whatever it might be. And I'm not comparing them in any way. That would be unfair to both guys. But Chris, in his own way, is very consistent and confident in how he goes about his business. Both of them really also hire very good people and let them work and do their job. And I think that's what the good ones really do, to be honest.
Absolutely. And this year's team, led by Avery Johnson. We'll get into Bill Snyder. We'll talk about him a little bit more as we move on with this. But when you talk about this year's team, I think you have to start with the young quarterback, Avery Johnson. He's the second leading rusher on the team. He can beat you through the air. He can beat you through the pass. We know K-State forever have loved those multi-threat quarterbacks that run all the RPO stuff, all the gap scheme, all the mauling you up front. They have another veteran offensive line, so start with Avery Johnson.
Well, he's a very, very talented young player. I think everybody around the league would understand and know that. What I think has impressed me as much as anything is just his approach. And he's very serious about everything when it comes to being a K-State football player. And what I mean by that is his nutrition, his weight training. He's very proud of the fact that at this young age, he's already a captain. I think he wants to be very much a team leader. He handles a lot of things so well for being so short into the process, if you will. I also really think that he is far ahead of most people that I've seen play quarterback here in my 23 years. Far ahead in terms of being able to go through his progressions and understand the game. You can see a lot of that, and then there's some things behind the scenes you don't necessarily see, but he's very, very serious about his craft. He wants to be a great player, to be honest. And I think with the scrutiny he's under, I think for a very young man, he's handled it about as well as you possibly could. Really talented kid.
He seems calm, too. He doesn't seem to, the moment never seems to be too big for him.
Yeah, and I think it's because he was so heavily recruited and because he's, young. It's different today than when you and I were in that scenario many, many years ago. And it just there's more exposure, there's more camps, there's more everything. And so I think the stage does appear to them to be smaller at times. Again, some people handle it better than others, but I think he is one of those that has seen a lot and done a lot for his youth.
Totally agree. When you think of Kansas State running game, of course, you think the quarterback, Collin Klein, and guys like that, and a great offensive line, different types of blocking scheme. Of course, Oklahoma State, Charlie Dickey was at K-State forever. Oklahoma State also, Mike Gundy hired Bill Snyder's son, Sean Snyder, in the offseason. What a great hire he has been in the special teams. But then you also think of really fast, kind of really quick, jittery type running backs that kind of play off of that power that the quarterback and the offensive line have. And so another feature back for K-State this year, the running game has been dominated as far as the running backs go by DJ Giddens.
He is a very, very talented young man. I think I've said this before, and I will preface this by saying I'm very prejudiced, but I believe that he is one of the most underrated football players in the country. He just does everything well. He catches the ball. He can run inside. He can run out. He's good in blitz pickup. He's a great teammate. He's really strong, tough, durable. There isn't really anything that you could say about DJ that would surprise people other than maybe the fact that he's as quiet as you'll ever see. But once he throws that helmet on, he becomes something different. And that different is really, really good. Very productive player. Just I love everything about him. We've had a lot of good running backs here, Darren Sproles and Deuce Vaughn and many, many others in between, but he fits. He's a good player.
I'm going to look to my left because I want to make sure and get this right. One thing that really sticks out to me about your rushing game, yes, DJ Giddens is an excellent runner. Yes, Avery Johnson is an excellent runner. Your two top rushers in this year's team. But K-State has 3 runs over 30 yards, all by different runners. Okay, you have a long of 48 and then also a run of 24. So the running game is diverse. It's also very consistent, and it's explosive. It kind of has a little bit of everything.
It does. And Dylan Edwards has lent to this football team that element, too, of not only do you have the speed of Avery, but now Dylan, too, to go along with DJ. Everybody sees DJ as a power runner, and he is. But he's also getting downfield a lot quicker than you think he is when you start really analyzing the way he runs. Long strider. Collin Klein was like that.
Yes.
He may be a little bit more graceful than Collin. Collin was a a much better athlete than I think everybody realized. They just kind of thought he was a big bulldozer, and he was that too. But he had some grace to him. I think Dylan has really. His best football is ahead of him, but much like I say with Avery, and they've known each other since they were young kids and kind of wanted to do this together all along, and it's working out for him this year. That he's another guy that is beyond his youth and years in how he handles himself, and I think again that goes back to the heavy recruiting and all the things he's seen and done in a very short period of time.
Absolutely. Talking about Collin Klein, I was at the Oklahoma State KState game in Manhattan in 2010. Oklahoma State squeaked out a win. It was Brandon Whedon's first year as a starting quarterback at OSU. And I remember listening to the post game on the way home, and one of the comments was, hey, Cam Newton's not walking through that door for K-State, right? And then, like, the next year they have Collin Klein. I'm like, well, I guess they found Cam Newton the second, right?
Yeah.
It was just kind of funny.
It was interesting with Collin because he just sprang onto the scene. Yeah. People kind of forget that he was not even really recruited here as a quarterback necessarily. And I'll never forget his junior year when we played at Miami of Florida. I always say that was the birth of what turned out to be Collin Klein's career. It was like a Rocky movie, man. He just kept getting beat up and knocked to the ground and bloodied, and would get up and go again. And once we got through 2011 and really started to find our juice, so to speak, then 2012 came around, and I've never, and I mean this sincerely, I've never seen another player put a team on his back and carry it like Collin did that year. A remarkable young man, remarkable.
Absolutely. That 2011 Oklahoma State K-State game in Stillwater was an amazing game, too. Went right down to the stretch. I remember that like it was yesterday in K-State. Oh, yeah. I think OSU and K-State won the Big 12 championships on back-to-back years in those 2 years, 11 and 12. OSU in 11, K-State in 12. So there's some more similarities between the two schools. Offensive line is always what K-State's known about. Again, I think if I have my numbers right, 4 different seniors, maybe another junior. You have some depth that's a little bit younger, but you have a couple of guys that really highlight the offensive line that have been there for a long time, 2 of the best linemen in the United States. So talk about them.
Well, Hadley Panzer probably is the main guy I should talk about. He's a very intriguing young man. He played 2A 11-man football out in Southwest Kansas. Wasn't necessarily a real highly regarded football talent. Not that he wasn't recruited, I don't mean that, but he also wasn't a 4 or 5-star guy either. And I think a lot of people overlooked his hands and feet and his heart. And those things for a lineman really count, don't they? I mean, we just that's just a fact of life. When he came to camp here, I think they said, "Oh boy, we got to get this guy here," and he's never let them regret that, because I remember he hadn't been here 2 weeks, and Coach Klieman said to me, "That kid is going to be a factor here." Absolutely. So they knew, and he's also a captain. He learned a lot from those guys we lost a year ago, Cooper Beebe, an All-American starting for the Dallas Cowboys, and those 3 sixth-year guys. And that's kind of what OSU does too. Those guys have been around a long, long time, and they're good players. Taylor Portier's been here a while too. He's gone through a couple of tough things with knee surgeries, ACL tear in both knees. But he's just a grinder, man. And we've got other guys, too. And I think that offensive line is probably 7 or 8 deep. And, you always want to be 10 deep. But I think a lot of offensive line coaches, including your guy, who's awesome. I love Charlie Dickey. He'd settle for 7 or 8 really good ones. I know that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm sure, being from Southwest Kansas, you're very familiar with the type of growing up that Panzer had, because you're at Fort Hays forever. Now, that's not South necessarily, but it certainly is West Kansas. And so I'm sure you knew all about how he grew up, right? Well, yeah.
And the other thing, too, is that there are a lot of young guys that we've had from out in that area, different towns, of course, but that have come here and not had much of a name and made a name for themselves. And it's happening now, too, all over the state. I think K-State over the years has been very proud of their walk-on program. Hadley was a young man that they scholarship pretty quickly, but he actually came as a gray shirt And then it wasn't long. He was on full scholarship. And we've had so many guys like that. You might remember the name Ian Campbell from out Southwest Kansas, really, really good defensive end. And now we're starting to get some of those guys from the Kansas City area and, Northeast Kansas and Southeast Kansas. We've had a lot of good ones for sure.
We thank that area of the world for producing Eddie Sutton here at Oklahoma State.
100%, yeah. Eddie's one of the best guys. And, it's funny when you think about that, to be honest, how many talented coaches have come out of that area too, right? Mm-hmm. He would be one. Gene Cady would be another.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Gene was people kind of forget that Gene was a 3-sport athlete at K-State many years ago. I had the distinct pleasure of having him on our basketball radio show one time when he was here visiting Coach Weber.
Nice.
And I found him to be one of the most fun and entertaining guys that I've had the pleasure to visit with in my near 50-year broadcast career. I loved everything about him. He was a Wildcat through and through, man, no doubt.
That's absolutely simply fantastic.
Yeah.
Jace Brown, let's move to your receivers now. Jace Brown is the dude for you guys. I mean, you have more than one receiver, but he's definitely the dude. He has twice as many receptions as the next guy. He has the longest reception of any receivers at 48 yards, and he averages twice as many yards per game as any other receiver. So is it as simple as stopping him?
Well, probably not, but he's really the standout guy. I think that part you got right. He's the biggest deep threat in my mind. He really came in here a year ago as a true freshman, and about a third of the way into the season really started to kind of figure some things out. And in the back third, he was terrific. I mean, unbelievably good. And I think after a little bit of a slow start in the first couple of games, he's really started to crank it up again. And I think Jace he's just an explosive guy, understands, what we're doing offensively now. Keegan Johnson has been pretty good too. And you got to have, those kind of guys step up and step into it. We're probably not getting as much out of a couple of other guys as I think they want yet. Like a Dante Cephas comes to mind, but maybe even Jaden Jackson. Those are talented guys, though, and you just hope that as the season progresses and they move on, you're going to see more and more from them because they've got the ability to do it, honestly.
Defense, it appears like it starts with your defensive line, maybe your entire front six, front seven box, however many people you have in the box that week, averaging giving up just 2.2 yards per carry, just 17 points a game. Now, K-State has been they've been outgained, I believe, through the air this year by their opponents. But as far as the running game goes, K-State's been simply fantastic. So talk about the defense a little bit.
Well, I think it does start with the fact that K-State has 8 returning starters defensively. We were fortunate to have 2 sixth-year guys come back at defensive end, and Cody Stuffelbein and Brendan Mott. I'm sure you have probably heard the name Brendan Mott.
Oh, yeah.
Has 4 sacks already. Big motor guy. We've had a lot of players like that over the years, too. Those 2 big fellows in the middle are not Eli Huggins, who starred here a few years ago. He was an amazing, amazing player. And one of the smartest football players I think I've been around. But, Uso Sayamalo and Damian Ilalio are both really, really strong and tough, and they clog that middle, pretty well. We're fortunate here to have 2 linebackers on the outside that really are tough and smart. But I think we've gotten better there because of a true sophomore in Austin Romaine in the middle. And then the secondary, even though they haven't played as well as I think they're capable of yet, I think they're only going to get better. We've got a lot of people back from that group from a year ago, including the starting corners. One of our safeties is a newcomer in Jordan Riley, and he's really a big hitter and loves contact. But he's starting to kind of figure some things out now, too. I think they felt like he was going to be great from the start, and he probably wasn't great. He was good, but not great. Now he's starting to figure it out a little bit.
Absolutely. Talking about Brendan Mott, he leads the K-State Wildcats in sacks. He leads K-State in quarterback hurries, and he leads K-State in tackles for loss. That dude's in the backfield, right?
Yeah, and just a big motor guy. I mean, One thing that I appreciated about him, though, too, is over the course of the time he's been here, he's just gotten bigger, stronger. K-State's always been a developmental program, and I think he's a pretty good example. You think about some of the guys that he learned under, including a guy like Felix Anudike-Uzamu, who's with the Chiefs. That's a pretty good thing. And Brendan's also playing the run as well, or, well, not as well, better this year than he's ever played it before. And with his ability to pass rush, he's a pretty valuable piece.
Absolutely. So from a K-State perspective, you've dove into this. I know usually Thursdays are very heavy prep days for play-by-play guys, so I'm sure you've already done all your research, or at least most of it, or at least a lot of it on Oklahoma State. So now that you've done all that, you've seen kind of the matchups. What are the biggest concerns from a K-State perspective?
I think what I would tell you is that, and you know this part, and so do your fans, that K-State is playing maybe the most veteran team in the league, if not the country. Yeah. That really sticks out to me. So many guys back on the offensive line, all of those receivers, the quarterback, Ollie Gordon. Yeah. It seems like Nick Martin has been there a long time. Yeah. Trey Rucker's been there a long time. That is a good thing. The other factor is that they're just so sound. You mentioned some of their coaches and Coach Gundy and all of those guys. They just have, like us, they have continuity and they know what they're doing. They know what they want to do. And that leads, I think, to pretty consistent play. That, like us, they haven't been perfect yet. Yeah. But I think, sometimes they always say the cream rises to the top, right? Absolutely. And I think you'll see both of these teams closer to the top than the middle when this season is over. If I'm wrong, I'll admit I'm wrong. But I like both teams. And so that stands out. The other factor is that they haven't run the ball as well as they did a year ago. And yet, the Utah game aside, they've still been able to throw it. Mm-hmm. And defensively, their numbers are not necessarily good, but they do so many things. And they can put some pressure on you. I remember a year ago, Nick Martin, as an example, had 17 tackles in our game down in Stillwater. And you know that. I'm sure they miss Colin Oliver. Who wouldn't?
Yes.
And what have you. But they just seem
Benson, the other linebacker from last year, they do miss him. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But they have enough talent, and they're always. You mentioned Sean a while ago, and I'm not just saying this because he was a K-State guy, but he's one of the better special teams people in America now, and that's a good hire. So I look at that staff and I say, okay, this is going to be a chess match, and it's going to be, it's really interesting because you look at this one, and I've heard some people describe it as Elimination Saturday. I don't know if we're necessarily that far in, but with that said, the Pokes or the Cats neither want to be 0-2 after Saturday afternoon, right? They just don't.
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
absolutely
big game.
Not. Absolutely not. Very simple questions. Kansas State beats Oklahoma State Saturday if?
Run the ball to start with, and probably I would say next, they've really put an emphasis on, they've been decent defensively. They've given up more pass yards, but they've not turned anybody over. They've gotten to the quarterback with hurries, pressures, some sacks, but they want to turn some people over. It's easier said than done, I suppose, sometimes. But if they run, and they've pretty much run on everybody for the most part this year, it gives them a chance to expand some of the things that they do, in the throw game with a very gifted but young quarterback. And then the mistakes, they made a ton of mistakes at Provo, been a lot better at home, but who isn't? So those are the things that I'm going to look for.
Yeah, that Retzlaff kid at BYU, he was a JUCO transfer and really didn't take over the reins till about 3/4 of the way through the year last year. You can tell he took the offseason to get comfortable. He is an entirely different player this year. I've been warning Oklahoma State fans of how dynamic that young – reminds me of your quarterback, Avery Johnson. And when he gets momentum and he's at home, he's really hard to stop, like K-State saw last week.
It's interesting, too, because I also would tell you I think they're better around him than the perception.
Yes, I agree.
Their top two running backs didn't play against K-State, and yet they were good enough. Moa was good. When they had to make plays, they made plays. That I still am marveling at the throw that Retzlaff made to Roberts in the corner of the end zone after the pick of Avery late in the first half, and that was a dagger. At that point, K-State, even though they were deflated, they were still down only 10-6, but that made it 17-6, and that was a gut punch.
It was. It absolutely was. Okay, last question for me here. Oklahoma State goes to Manhattan. They take the 4.5-hour trip up north, and they head into hostile territory, which will be one of the best college football environments in all the United States of America, and comes away with a victory if?
Well, I would. This may be different than what your coaches will tell you, but I think they have to run the ball a little bit better.
Yeah, they do.
Because if they do, it makes the quarterback better.
Yes.
And they're good enough and veteran enough. I'm just telling you, I've always been a big fan of Presley. He has a way of getting open against K-State. He's not the only guy, but he's hurt K-State over the years. There's no doubt about that. And if they get like some of the stuff that they do really, really well going, like the screen game and some of that stuff, they become a handful,
Yeah.
So I think if they run the ball and have balance, and I know that's coach speak, but if they run the ball as good as they are from a year ago running it and what they're capable of throwing it, there's a reason they were picked where they were, man. They're a good football team.
Yeah.
It's all about meeting the requirements, right? And coming into a hostile environment and handling that. That'll be a factor too, because the joint will be jumping. We know that.
Absolutely will. It absolutely will. And I want to finish with this because I want to circle back to your career. And you mentioned how Mott is kind of that guy that is the program guy. K-State builds players. They make players. They bring them in and develop them over years in their system. And hey, man, you kind of did the same thing as a broadcaster. You started out there at Fort Hays. I mean, you started doing high school games. You probably sat in the snow, not even in a press box, or sat in press box. You weren't quite sure if you needed a tetanus shot. You've been there, done all that kind of stuff, right, in Kansas. So you worked your way up from the ground up, just like a lot of these players at K-State. So I'm sure it's a perfect marriage.
Well, you're very kind. I appreciate you saying it that way. And I do feel like, back in the day that I did pay some dues.
Oh, yeah.
But I needed to, I was just a farm kid trying to live a dream, man.
Yeah.
And I will say this, I've been as lucky as anybody, because I don't even realize at the time when I'm in my first job, as an example, that I was working with 2 or 3 Hall of Fame broadcasters. You don't think about it like that when you're 19 or 20 or 21 years old.
Right.
and so you just persevere over time. Everybody always that really knows me say that I'm the I'm not sure exactly, they say it in different ways, but I'm probably the exception to the rule in radio because I've been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
And everybody in radio has been fired at least once. I'm the exception of that rule, knock on wood.
Or had to quit because they couldn't make enough money.
Yeah. Well, I remember in my first job, you'll appreciate this, I thanked my boss, Kay Milia, who I dearly loved, and said, I cannot believe I'm making a living doing this.
Yeah.
And about 2 months later, I'm in his office asking him how I'm going to pay for tires.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're like mopping the floor. You're doing everything else just so you can go do play-by-play on Friday night because that's what you want to do.
Yeah, right? I also said to him at one point, Kay, I just want to do sports. And you know what his answer was back?
Too bad.
You can't do that here, buddy. Yeah, I'm sorry. You're going to do everything here.
Yeah.
And you know what? I have no regrets on that. It made me a better broadcaster, a better person. And like I say, I've been very fortunate, man. I've spent 23 seasons at K-State. It's such a great place. I grew up a Wildcat fan. Life's pretty good for me. But thank you for the kind words. It truly means a lot.
You're in a pretty darn good place in Fort Collins, too. That's a great
100%,
town.
yeah. I spent 13 great years in Colorado. I knew 2 people in the whole state when I moved out there, and still have many, many, many friends out there. As a matter of fact, after our game this week, we're off next week, and then we go to Boulder, and I'll probably catch up with a few friends when I go out there. So, yeah, I've been quite lucky.
All right, Wyatt Thompson, this has been such a great honor. I mean, like I said, we just kind of took a shot in the dark and say, hey, I'll call this phone number, and I'll be damned if you didn't answer the phone and say, hey, sure. So what a great honor. What a wonderful deal this is that you decided to join. I can't thank you enough. Great honor. Thank you so much, and looking forward to Saturday. I hope I can say that Saturday night, but I can say that as of Thursday.
Well, we're both probably saying that, right? Let's hope it all works out. But one thing we know, 2 good teams going to get after it, and there have been exceptions to the rule with a blowout here and there, but over the course of years, we've seen a lot of, and I'm going to say in the time I've been at K-State, we've seen 35, 31 games, and we've seen 10-7 games, and just big time battles. And wouldn't surprise me if we saw it again, something in the middle there, maybe. Who knows?
It was 5 or 6 years ago. It seemed like the K-State kept throwing the ball in that south end zone, and Oklahoma State got a penalty. You remember that game? That was crazy, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. This is a hard place to play, but so is Boone. Boone Pickens is one of the hardest played. I said in another interview today, last year when we were down there, I woke up in the middle of the night and I'm hearing that banging on the sides. That lasts for a couple of days after you've been there a few times.
That's awesome. Just don't put your crowd mics anywhere close to the paddle people, right? Yeah. Absolutely. Wyatt Thompson, thank you so much for joining OState Daily.
Hey, it was my pleasure, I promise you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.